People's Platform.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of the People's Platform, coming to you live and direct from our Newsfirst studios here in Colombo. For the Newsfirst team, I am Jayamal Ratnayaka. The human mind is a very fascinating thing. Since the dawn of civilization, humans have created towering buildings that are bigger than some of the biggest mountains in the world. They have created vast bodies of water that rival the sea, and in most cases are only second to the vast ocean. And with the Industrial Revolution came a new age for the humankind. And in 2024, there is a new shift, a new paradigm shift taking place within humankind. And that is the advent of AI, which is artificial intelligence. And tonight with me, I have a very important and interesting guest who is here to talk to us and our viewers about what AI is, its past, its present, and its future. With me in the studios tonight, we have Professor John Thangarajah, Director of Research, Centre for Industrial AI Research and Innovation, RMIT Australia, a university that is very well known here in Sri Lanka as well. Thank you very much for joining me, Professor, and it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Jamal, and it's my pleasure to be here.
Definitely. And let's get the ball rolling with the very first question that I have for you. AI has been something that, if you're a 90s kid, that you saw on The Matrix, the sci-fi film that came out in 1995, if I'm not mistaken, or 1999, if I'm not mistaken. And in that, we saw a dystopian future where humans created AI and then AI took over the world. But is it really doom and gloom when it comes to the advent and the development of AI?
Yeah, great question. And like you quite correctly said, for a long time, when we talked about artificial intelligence, we go back to the movies, and even before The Matrix, it was The Terminator, right? And as an AI researcher, I've been in the field for almost 25 years now. These movies would always make us cringe a little bit, right? Because it brings more of a dystopian fear factor than anything else. There's also the flip side of it, where people paint this utopian future as well, right? Where AI will solve absolutely everything.
Everything, yes.
The reality is, most researchers and most scientists, most people in AI, in the tech, we're really trying to build technology using AI to help us, humans, assist us, extend our own capabilities, right? That's what we've been doing for a very long time, really, for centuries with every technology that we invent. It's about how we improve ourselves. So it's not about replacing us, although in your intro, you said the past, present, future of AI. You're quite right. In the past, the term AI is not new. We are hearing more of that now because of the likes of ChatGPT and so on. But it was coined in the 50s. Yes. Right? It's been around for a long time. And to a certain extent, this replacing the human bit sort of was ingrained from when it started, and we started doing chess playing, for example, very popular, very common use of AI when we think about it, back in the 70s and 80s and so on. It was really about beating the human. That wasn't necessarily about beating the human per se, it was just how you advance those technologies, right? But when you look back, that chess playing really was brute force. It wasn't really AI per se, right? So we had peaks. Where we are now is at a very interesting conjecture, right? Where the likes of ChatGPT has really made it accessible. Or one part of AI, right? And we can chat about this if you like, but one part of AI, the generative AI, the large language models, has really taken over the world by a storm, more than anyone expected. And it's quite remarkable. Is that a fear factor? Well, I don't think so, but I'm biased, right? I embrace it with much enthusiasm to a certain extent. I'm very excited about it.
And you're optimistic of the users.
Very optimistic about the use and so on. So, to my point before, most of the people in this world, what we're doing with AI is really about helping the human. It's not about replacing the human. Do some humans get replaced? Yes, right? In the same way that digitizations replace lots of human jobs, right? In that sense, but we pivot. New jobs arise because of that. Again, you in your intro, you mentioned the Industrial Revolution, another great example. When the Industrial Revolution was going on, were people afraid of their jobs being lost? Yes.
Yes.
Were their jobs lost? Yes. Were there new jobs created? Much more than before, right? And the same thing is where we are now as well. That's what I said. We are at a very interesting point where people are now realizing the power of AI. There's more to AI than just ChatGPT and the large language models, and we'll see more of that now emerge and come to the forefront. So I think it's really exciting, and we should be excited, I think, as a human race as well, about artificial intelligence and what it can do for us. And how we can extend our capabilities, and we can touch some examples if you like. But it really is a wonderful time to be. I think, especially once you see the transition, and we talk about AI. A lot of people know about it now, or heard about it. But like I said, we've been using it. You've been using it for a very long time, right? You pick up your phone, you search something. You've been doing that for a few decades at least now,
definitely.
Right? That's AI. Every time you pick up your phone and you do a translation, that's AI, right? So we've been using that for a long time, and AI is everywhere. Okay, Facebook, that's been around for a long time. YouTube has been around for a long time.
Yes.
What powers it behind it is a lot of artificial intelligence techniques, right? Not large language models, but still AI nevertheless.
So, Professor, you were saying that AI has been around for a long time, and you gave some very practical examples as well. But if I'm not mistaken, as of 2021 or 22, ChatGPT has revolutionized the access people have to AI. How did this access become more accessible to people all of a sudden? How did these chatbots come forward in such a short amount of time and became accessible to anyone and everyone who has a smartphone or a laptop?
Yeah, no, this is a great question and a really great point, because it's a turning point in that sense, right? I think it was a very smart move to make it accessible to people.
Right.
Okay, in the past, often the big large companies, they would build this technology and they don't necessarily release it. Okay, it's proprietary in some sense.
It's patented.
It's about patented and so on. But the world changed a bit, even with the search engine. Think about it, right? ChatGPT is amazing. It's free for you to use for now.
Yes, for now.
Okay, if you're a company trying to use it, you'll be charged soon enough if you haven't been already.
And I think for the latest versions, you have to
100%,
subscribe. Yeah.
Exactly, right? So it was a teaser in some sense, right? But a search engine you use for free, right? But it's not really free because ads and all get. So there are different models. But as humans, though, sometimes we're not privy to how companies make money and so on out of these things, right? But it is fantastic, and I think it was a very smart move to make it available to people and accessible to people. The danger in that, of course, is that you may not know how to use it properly, and you may not even harness it to its full potential as well, right? So those are some of the limitations. They are not even understand the limitations.
Right.
So those are the cons to it, but a lot of pros to it, like you said, right?
So let's talk about the cons, because there have been instances where certain terrorists have used maybe deep fake. We've seen that in the movies also, like you and I were discussing in Mission Impossible, where you can make yourself seem like you're someone else.
Yep.
And deep fakes have infiltrated social media and also society at large at present. And there can be chatbots used by scammers to scam people out of their money.
Yep.
How do we ensure that AI is used ethically and it does not fall into the hands of the wrong people?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is again a great question, a very important one as well, right? And something we need to take seriously. That said, I think it's very similar to other technologies and tools. And the classic example I give always is a knife. Imagine a world without knives today. How would you cut your veggies and cook a meal without a knife, right? But also you can use it to harm people. Okay, how do we regulate a knife? At a very young age, as our kids grow up, we teach them that how to use a knife. First, not to harm themselves, and then how to put it to good use, and then you teach them the values of hurting people and so on. And I think this is true here as well. In the wrong hands, people will do wrong. You take the atom bomb. Okay, is that the fault of the chemist that, right? And so we've got to think about all of these things. So it's easy to point at AI and say, oh, well, in the wrong hands. Yes, true. I guess the game changer here to a certain extent is, like you said before, accessibility, right? Deep fakes and deep fake algorithms, to create deep fakes these days is accessible, it's easier, right? Whereas, nuclear power obviously is one of the things that you should really worry about, way more than AI, in my opinion, right? But it's a lot more, it's not as accessible, let's put it this way, right? You just couldn't go down to a PETA and buy a
nuclear bomb. Yes.
Okay, thankfully.
Thankfully.
But that is what I mean by it's a bit more accessible in that sense. How do we regulate it? How do we regulate knives? That's what I mean, right? There's two things: regulation, education. Regulation is all good, but I think education and what we do in that side is a lot more important.
Right.
How we as humans also value things is also a lot more important. Before we try to fix the technology and regulate that, we also need to somehow, as humans, we need to also better ourselves to a certain extent, right? And that's, conflict has always been there. Yes, all these AI and other technologies can make it a lot more harmful, have greater impact, but to solve that, regulations are very important. Don't get me wrong, and I think we need to think about how do we regulate that. The challenge sometimes is where does ownership lie, and so on, right? I'll give you another very good example that I use that often people don't think about, right? One of the biggest problems AI, is it's a software. So if the computer makes a decision, who's responsible? Right? That's one of the biggest questions. So take an autonomous car. If it makes a wrong turn, who's
at fault?
Who's at fault? Is it the car manufacturer? Is it you as the owner? I'm not sure. So when we think of these regulations, let's go to taking a photograph, right? If you take a photo, who owns it? So let's say you're a photographer, right? But you want me to take a photo of you. You come and set up the photo all nice in camera for me, and I come and click the button. Who owns it? It's me who clicked the button. Yes. Right? But is it fair? So, but that's the rule. It's a common rule.
If you go to the legal nitty-gritty of things.
So that kind of legal regulations and governance needs to be in play, and it'll get there.
But for the most part, it's incumbent on the people who are using such AI to ensure that they don't involve themselves in unethical practices.
100%, right? That's what I said. It's true for anything, any technology. It's up to the people. I think that's the key. But beyond that, I think regulations are important for sure. Where we got to think about is other aspects where we can, things like bias, for example, being able to understand from a business. Let's say you're a business, you're a clothing company, let's just say, and you want to use some AI to understand your demographics, to understand what kind of advertising material, or even for
to analyze
Sirasa, market trends, and so on. I think you could have specialists within your organization to make sure that the data you're getting is good, sufficient, analyzed appropriately, that you have good representation, and remove bias.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Bias in AI is because one simple reason: we are biased. It's as simple as that. If there's bias in the data, obviously the AI is going to be biased, right?
Yes.
But if you understand it, if you know your data, you know what you're getting in, then you can clean it. Then you can address these things. So that's where I think for companies, and addressing this issue of bias and so on, having people who understand data, how to interpret that in terms of from the ethical perspectives, from the bias perspectives, and how to mitigate that. That's really important, I think, moving forward. Any industry trying to adopt AI, especially data-driven AI. There are other aspects of AI as well, like I said before, but anything data-driven AI, I think is really important to have.
To remove the prejudices.
Yes, but you've got to have someone who's an expert, who understands.
Being widely discussed, but is little known, and that is why we have Professor John Thangarajah with us. We will now cross over for a short commercial break. Stay with the People's Platform. We will be right back.
People's Platform. නව වසරක්, නව නායකත්වයක්, නව ජයග්‍රාහී ගමනක්. ශ්‍රී ලංකා සිම්බාබ්වේ එක්දින සහ T20 ක්‍රිකට් තරගාවලිය. ජනවාරි 6 වෙනිදා සිට 18 වෙනිදා දක්වා පිටිය වටකොට නැගෙන ජයගොස සජීවීව විඳින්න. TV1 නාලිකාව සමග රැඳෙන්න.
අභිමන් කොහෙද මේ අයියෝ මට කතා කරේ නැත්තේ?
මං හිතුවා ආමට කතා කරේ කියලා.
කුරුළු හරිම අහිංසකයි කියලා මං හිතුවා. ඇත්ත කුරුළු ඊට වඩා හුඟා වෙනස්.
ඔයාගේ අලුත් ජීවිතේ ගොඩනගා ගන්න ඔයාට ඕන විදිහට වෙනස් වෙන්න. හැබැයි මන් දන්නේ නැහැ අභිමන් ඔයාගේ වෙනස මට දරා ගන්න පුළුවන් වෙයිද කියලා.
නීල පබලු අද රාත්‍රී 9ට සිරස ටෙලිතිරයෙන්.
If the people of this country still opt to vote for the Rajapaksas and the SLPP, then we have very, very little hope.
Sri Lanka has a unique position of being the absolute last in the world in terms of revenue to GDP.
You need to get rid of corruption, then only we can think about at least some rationale in the development of a country.
As a party, we are planning to organize a lot of protest campaign and some meetings and demonstrations, all kind of things from January.
When the purchasing power, what we call the aggregate demand, goes down, it will have a negative impact in the economy as well.
Face to Face, Newsfirst political talk show, Monday to Friday at 8 p.m. on TV1.
TV1 TV for life.
Health sector falls into crisis after government decides to grant allowance to doctors. Multiple trade unions on strike. Opposition leader questions reason to spend 250 million to deploy naval ship to the Red Sea. Chaminda Vijayasiri quits parliament. SJB to replace him with Vasala Tilaka. Ranil is the non-partisan presidential candidate, says former minister Ravi Karnanayaka. France gets a new prime minister.
TV1 TV for life. The People's Platform.
Welcome back to the People's Platform. Tonight we are discussing artificial intelligence, the past, the present and the future. I'm joined by Professor John Thangarajah, and before the break we were discussing some very interesting facts about AI, its uses, how it can be used for unethical means and so on. But let's localize this topic, Professor. Let's take this into the context of Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka for the longest time has been attempting to adopt digital literacy. It has been attempting to increase digital literacy, e-governance, introduce AI into its administrative functions and so on. But given the tumultuous time Sri Lanka has been in or been through, it's been a tough ride for Sri Lanka. Although we have somewhat okay digital literacy when it comes to the context of Asia or South Asia, there are many who still don't understand the uses and also there are many who don't use these platforms or these algorithms in their day-to-day lives or even their academic lives. So how do you localize this, and how do you educate at least the next generation of Sri Lankans to make better use of these technologies?
Yeah, no, and that's fantastic, Jamal. Really good question. And it's something that I'm also really passionate about in terms of education, right? That's what got me into research as an academic in the very first place, right? Look, introducing AI, and AI is such a big thing, and you're right, we need to bring this to our curriculum. But I always say that, you got to crawl before you walk, before you run. Artificial intelligence, in some sense, is at the running stage, right? When you talk about digital, and there are other techniques as well, but before we get to artificial intelligence, digital literacy is absolutely key. Okay, I think the new generation coming up, they're growing into a world that is digital, that is inherently digital, right? So one important thing is infrastructure, though. Unfortunately, it is not cheap. It's not a book and pen that you get. Although, I must tell you, I learned to program first on pen and paper, right? Because we had access to one computer that we would share once a week, sort of thing, right? This was much long time ago, of course, right? But so it can be done, but it's certainly not conducive. However, you need to think about how do we get the resources out to schools, especially in a country like Sri Lanka. I'm very sure that not all schools have iPads for kids.
Certainly.
Right? Perhaps some private schools, but certainly not all schools will have this kind of infrastructure.
Yes.
Without it, though, it's also very hard, right? How do you learn digital literacy in that sense? How do you learn how to program, code, and so on? How do we get that access? My kids are in primary. They are 8.5, right? They're in grade 3 now. They're already coding. And they kind of self-learning these things. It's incredible because they're born into this digital world. And often people look at me and go, oh, well, they're your kids, you taught them. Actually not. They kind of played around and self-learn, and it's kind of intuitive for them, right? But they've got to have that infrastructure, though, right? So in some sense, we are very lucky, but I realize not everyone is fortunate in that sense.
Certainly.
So I think for a country like Sri Lanka, what we really need to think about is that early education on digital literacy. How do we make it accessible, though? It doesn't necessarily mean that everyone has a laptop per se, but with limited resources, how do we maximize this? We can also deliver things online these days and so on, but we really need to focus on that digital literacy right from a young age and then grow that through. And then we bring in things like AI, cybersecurity, data science, and things like that into the picture. But you really got to focus on that basic digital literacy first.
That's right. So again, when we're talking about industry applications of AI, when it comes to interdisciplinary collaborations, there are many industries that AI could be beneficial for. Healthcare, agriculture, transportation. We see AI being used in other nations where that has benefited those industries, and they've gone leaps and bounds beyond what they used to be. So what sort of research and innovation, as your part, the Director of Research from the Center of Industrial AI Research and Innovation, what have you been contributing to when it comes to interdisciplinary collaborations to support industries, like I said, agriculture, transportation, and so on?
Look, this is what I do day in, day out. My primary role really is to understand the business needs from the industry, and then see what technologies that we have from the theory and research, and how we apply that in practice, right? So you asked for examples. So one example in the healthcare sector. So we worked with hospital in Melbourne that has this large database of CT scans of men over 60, and I'm not sure if you know, but 1 in 7 men in Australia is diagnosed with prostate cancer. Some of it turns out fatal, some people live with it, no issues at all, right? But it is a killer, giant killer in some sense. MRIs is the gold standard, but men don't just go for MRIs, right? Yes. And we know the traditional methods don't work very well. So what these doctors reached out to me and said, well, can AI help in some sense? So we looked at computer vision, which is an AI technique as well. And so we took these CT scans, and because the doctors knew that there is a possibility to detect prostate cancer, but to the naked eye, human eye, it wasn't that visible.
Okay.
Unlike MRIs, which is they can easily diagnose. So we showed that, given the data, we developed some techniques, and we could show that, we could, when there is the presence of prostate cancer, the AI techniques could detect that, right? So that was fairly groundbreaking in that sense, because these are cities that would lie around, right? And you could detect that this person has prostate cancer early, and early detection is the key. Right? And so that for early intervention, absolutely right. So that's one example. Another example is, in agriculture. You mentioned agriculture as well. We've worked with companies looking at how do you detect weeds in an agriculture setting, right? And when to harvest. That's another big thing, because usually there's certain times of the years. If you're too late, you miss some. If you're too early, then you got to redo it again.
Yes.
And for very large farms, this becomes quite problematic and quite expensive. So looked at again using computer vision to identify when to
apply the herbicides.
Apply herbicides, or when to harvest, and so on.
All
and
right.
things,
Okay.
right?
Yes.
And I can give you lots of examples, but they're all multidisciplinary, as you said. Because we need the domain experts. So I know nothing about CT scans.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So I need the doctors to tell me.
So it's a
about
collaboration.
it. Exactly. So you bring the domain knowledge in. And so if you tell me, let's use AI to understand your target audience, right? I don't quite know your sector as well, but if you tell me and I understand your data, then I could probably tell you some techniques that we could use.
If you feed the data, there is a certain outcome that
and
you
understanding
can get
the data, right? You have knowledge about the data that I don't in your particular domain, and that's very important for me. Otherwise, for me, data is data. I'm just crunching it with no.
Yes, it's going to be names and numbers.
Exactly, right? So really everything that we do is multidisciplinary for that particular reason.
Right. So we had a very engaging conversation with Professor John Thangarajah, Director of Research, Centre for Industrial AI Research and Innovation, RMIT University, Australia. Unfortunately, although I have many more questions to direct to our guest tonight, and I'm sure our viewers are also very engrossed in this conversation, we are out of time for tonight's edition of the People's Platform. But thank you very much, Professor, for joining me this evening and educating me and our viewers on the recent trends of AI, what AI truly is, and what the interdisciplinary approaches are for AI and its cons as well. Thank you very much for joining me this evening.
Thank you, Jamal. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
And that's all the time we have for the People's Platform tonight. Thank you for tuning in. We will see you again tomorrow. Take care and good night.